This is Greg Collins, Substitute Teachers Lounge. This week, my district got our back-to-school details. The teachers' lives are changing, the students' lives are changing, and yes, substitute teachers' lives are changing. Let's discuss it today. Sixth graders, what's your favorite podcast?
Substitute Teachers Lounge.
All right, guys, if there was ever an episode that I really want to get your feedback on, it's this one. So let me get those formalities out of the way. My email address is gregcollinssubstitute@gmail.com. Twitter is @SubTeachLounge. We have that Substitute Teachers page on Facebook. We also have our YouTube channel. Now, since this is just going to be me talking, there won't be a video version of this episode, but we do have some fine video versions of episodes on our YouTube channel, especially the one with Jen Stevens is now over 1,200 views after she published her book, Fast Feast Repeat. So that was a good one. I'd encourage you to get on there and watch that one and see if anything else catches your eye. Now, we're all going through the same thing right now. We have been since March, but we're now getting into the planning for back to school process. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that today. In fact, we're going to spend all our time on that today because it's really important. I'm going to mention to you what the back-to-school details that have been made public in our district, the one I'm in Kentucky. It has been published in the newspaper, so it is public material now, and I'm going to go over a little bit about that. But, we're still in a situation where, it might change within the next 3 weeks. One thing I was looking forward to yesterday, I'm recording this on the Saturday before it's released. So yesterday was Friday, July, what would that be? That would be the 9th, July 9th. And our Kentucky Athletic Association was meeting for the high school. So I was looking forward when I recorded this to also be able to share with you the sports details because I do softball and volleyball. Volleyball is considered a high-contact sport. I've already bought my whistle that is push-button operated, so I know I'm going to need that. So they did not decide anything. I think they were a little bit paranoid to make a decision this soon before the season started. Volleyball is scheduled for practice to start in a couple of weeks and for the season to start August 17th. Here's hoping. I will miss that a lot if we don't have a season, but I want everybody to remain safe as well. Now, talk about things changing. I know there's a church here in town that went back for online services June, and then our county had enough increase in cases that they decided to go back to virtual services for July. So things are very much in motion, and we're going to have to react accordingly. Our governor in the state of Kentucky just switched our mask rule from recommended to mandatory, and that started Friday at 5 p.m. And, the way I look about that, I know the arguments on both sides, but I will comply because I want to do my part in keeping everybody safe, and I'm happy to do that. In fact, I posted on my Facebook page a picture of me wearing a mask and saying something to the effect of, it's 5 p.m., mask up, Kentucky. I'm wearing my mask. I'm exercising my right to help keep you healthy. So that's the way I'll approach it, and I understand other arguments as well. So let's talk a little bit about back to school in Kentucky, and I assume a lot of this is going to be the same all over, but please, if you've got ideas or if you just want to share with us what your school system is doing, Greg Collins Substitute @gmail.com or the Substitute Teachers Lounge Facebook page. Now, I'll start out by giving you a few dates for our school system in the area. I'll also tell you that I'm going to give you, now I don't want to say negative. We know there's some of the changes are going to be different. I'm going to call them changes that will be more challenging for the substitute teacher. And I'll also give you some changes that might actually create some positives for the substitute teacher. I'll save that for a little bit, and I'll go through some details first. In our area, it looks like the teachers themselves were delayed 2 days. They were supposed to start on August 10th. They're now going to start on August 12th. Now, as I understand, I think the students were then supposed to come back about August 12th, and that has been pushed back 2 weeks for August 26th. That means that what was a 2-day difference between when the teachers were going to come back and when the students were going to come back is now 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, the teachers not only will have to prepare like they have in years past, even to an ultimate, to a more intense level that I'll describe here in a minute, but they're also going to have to completely sanitize their rooms by CDC standards. They're going to have to rearrange their chairs, and I'll get into that in just a minute. So they've got a handful of things to do. My wife, again, as you remember, is a 5th grade teacher. I see the way some of these parameters are falling out effective. Maybe some of the younger classes more so than the older classes. But given those dates, let me tell you what our school system has decided to do. They sent out a survey, a mandatory survey that the parents were to complete. They had to choose between 3 attendance options. Option number 1, in-person attendance. Your children will attend school each day, adhering to safety guidelines and measures. That's the way it's been in the past, other than the safety guidelines. So that would be school as usual in that regard. The second choice is called interactive distance learning. Your children will attend classes virtually, maintaining a regular daily class schedule, complete the same or similar work as their in-person peers, and communicate regularly with classroom teachers. Now, in actual performance and carrying this out, what I understand, this means that the student still has to adhere to the classroom schedule. And what this will most likely mean in most classes is that if you choose this option, you're going to log into class at 8 o'clock just like all other students. You're going to be looking into the classroom and see the students whose parents had chose to send them to the classroom itself. So it will be, I would compare it to some church services now. There's a few churches that are giving you both in-service and online options. So you got some of the members attending in-service. You got some members watching online. That's the type of thing that I picture for this scenario. So some in the classroom and then some watching at the exact same time. They have no option, the exact same time, and taking their class that way. I'm sure there will be testing situations that the teachers will have to design that online. And of course, let's face it, this is going to require a lot more work for the teachers because they now have to deal with in-house students as well as outside students, and they'll have to prepare in different ways for both of those. So that was option number 2. The last one, which I had heard would be similar to homeschooling, and I still think that a little bit, but I still think the way they've got it worded is this too will add a lot of work onto the teachers. Independent distant learning. Your children will attend school through a virtual platform or correspondence packet and or workbooks provided by the district. It will be self-paced and will have limited interaction with teachers and staff. So it's different from option 2 because you don't have as much interaction with the teachers, but the teachers are going to have to design it and send it to those students. they have to keep up. It is self-paced, but they have to keep up. Sounds a little bit like homeschool, except for the fact that the material is going to be coming directly from the schools, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it's the case, but those are the three situations. Now, as we move forward from there, then we've got three different types of students, three different situations for the students, either in the classroom, observing in an online situation and interacting often with the teachers, and then the option of having it more self-paced in the home environment. And of course, that's what the parents have to choose. I will say that they were, the school system said you choose now. It's not something you can flip-flop back and forth over and over. That would be an administrative nightmare, of course. But you have to make that choice, and then the schools will go from there. Now, in addition to all that, these are the safety precautions that the school system put in place. Everyone will be asked to wear masks into the buildings this fall. Students, staff, and visitors will be expecting to wear masks when they are moving around the building or when they are within 6 feet of other individuals. Masks will not be required for children under the age of 6 or for those with medical exemptions. Classrooms will be set up with social distancing in mind, with the goal that students will be able to remove their mask while they are seated in their desk. Now, I've seen one picture of a school. It's not in our district, but I saw it on it's actually an Instagram account I follow for substitute teachers, of somebody that had already set their classroom up 6 feet apart. It looked good. It looked nice and clean. If anything, we're doing this for safety precautions, and thank goodness we are. This will kind of pull students further apart. Maybe the nitpicking or the punching when kids are goofing off of each other. That's not going to happen now, or at least it's not going to happen per policy now. So part of that may make the in-room part of the classroom easier to handle because we're going to be further apart. You're not going to be able to whisper to your neighbor and talk to your neighbor very much unless you do that from 6 feet away, and then that's going to be a lot more obvious to the teacher. So we'll have to see how discipline changes as we move forward on this too. Now, common areas will not be used by a large group of students. This includes, but is not limited to, cafeterias, auditoriums, and gymnasiums. And the best summary I heard of this is, first of all, the kids will be eating lunch in their rooms. They cannot congregate. I have heard that, at least in our district, that maybe even music classes or classes that involve singing or any situation really that droplets or any type of body fluid, I guess is the best way to say it, because I assume sweat is included in that too. You can't be close enough that could be a problem being shared with other students. So that's one thing they're going to have to keep in mind. I understand in some situations it may be that the teachers will lose their private planning period because it may be that students can't go to the classes they went to during the teacher's planning period before. They might actually have to stay in the classrooms, but I think that's all to be worked out. So I hate that for the teachers. I don't mind it so much for us as substitute teachers because we didn't have a whole lot to do during that time anyway. Personally, I would just rather be with the students and help bond with them. Maybe that could be more of a fun period for them. We don't know. That's something that will have to be worked out. So as I said, students will be eating breakfast and lunch in the classroom or at designated spaces. Temperature checks are highly encouraged before students leave home each morning, but the schools will be conducting temperature checks for each individual before they enter our buildings. Thank goodness technology has changed in regard, and you can do it fairly quickly, although I do foresee lines at the schools when they first open up each morning. From a sanitary situation, commonly touched surfaces will be disinfected frequently throughout the day and during non-school hours. Everyone will be asked to wear masks while riding a bus, and most of the school districts that I teach in have a strong bus system. Students will be spaced out as much as possible on the buses, just as I discovered when I visited Hilton Head a couple of weeks ago, which, by the way, they went to a mask inside buildings policy while we were there, right in the middle of the week. But we were complying with that already anyway. But the system that the airplane was using that we were on is loading from the back to the front to try to cut down on as much passing of individuals as they could. And that seemed to work well. That's what they're going to do with the school buses in our area too. Seat from the back to the front and unload from the front to the back. And then, of course, buses will be disinfected after students unload. This will include seats, seat backs, windows, and other commonly touched surfaces. So now I'm going to assume that is similar to what's going on in your school system, but please let me know if it's not. Now, I said before that substitute teachers' lives are going to change. Now, I'm not about to sit here and tell you that we're going to have to go through as much as what the teachers are going through, because they now have to come up with different lessons plans based on the 3 categories of students on attendance, or what they're calling attendance options. They have to plan that. They have to go back 2 weeks before the school start and move desks around and sanitize everything to make sure all the desks stay 6 feet apart. They have to, and logistically, obviously, when schools start, they'll have to police the hallways to make sure everybody's keeping their distance. They'll have to wear their mask. Students are allowed to take their mask off when they're at their desk and 6 feet apart from each other. So obviously that'll be a case where the teachers are going to have their head up just about all the time to make sure everybody is complying with that. So, and who knows whether this is the new normal or whether the worst of it will be over after, this school year. So it's just a lot of changes. Teachers will have to work harder. They were always worked hard. I don't know how they're going to work harder, but they'll at least have to work differently. Maybe that's this thing. That there's going to be a lot more intensity involved with their work. They may not have their planning period. I mean, who knows about that? I will also tell you that what I have learned in my area about substitute teachers, there's a couple of different things. First of all, let's go to the more challenging part. I have a feeling that as we get, I shouldn't say I have a feeling, because I've actually heard somebody say this, that substitute teachers may be called in to help during this 2-week prior to the students returning, just because sanitizing, moving chairs around may be a little too much for one teacher. They may need a help, even if it's half a day. So that could be one thing that happens. I know for a fact that I have already been contacted. I'm basically signed up for 2 school districts in my county. One is public, and the other one I would call semi-private. I don't know if you really consider it a private school. But the semi-private one has already told me when I sent in my credentials for this week. I got an email. Now, it's not just me specifically. It was to all the substitute teachers that they basically worded it as if they'll need substitute teachers more than ever this year. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I have a hunch. It means that if a teacher ends up getting sick and it does end up being a positive test for COVID, that teacher's going to have to quarantine for 14 days. They're not going to have a choice. So that may actually increase the demand for substitute teachers. Yeah, hopefully we're all doing our healthy things and that doesn't happen. But let's face it, the world is not a perfect place. We've got to interact with families and everybody else. In fact, I remember a story I heard on another podcast I listened to this week. It's a religious type podcast, and they were talking about how this guy's 92-year-old mother-in-law got tested positive for the virus, and she never goes anywhere, even wears a mask inside her house. And they're thinking, what in the world? Well, it just so happens that her daughter that came to visit her 2 weeks had it, was asymptomatic, had the antibody, she tested for it, and that's how the 92-year-old lady caught the virus. Now, interestingly enough, the person that was telling the story, the son-in-law, was talking about how he just thought, at her age, it would be difficult to recover from it, but she did. She came home from the hospital in 2 days. So we can listen to as many things on the internet, on TV about what COVID does. It's constantly changing. Thank goodness there's survivors at all levels, and we still have to be cautious no matter what age group, young or old, that we're talking about. But I hope that no teachers in our school system test positive anytime, but if after school starts, I foresee that if they test positive, and then I assume that all the kids would have to be tested, I don't know where that will go, but it may actually increase a demand for substitute teachers if someone has to quarantine. Or maybe they'll just quarantine if a family member had tested positive, but they hadn't yet. I don't know where that will go, but it's something we'll definitely have to discuss. Now, I will say one other thing that I saw mentioned in my area was perhaps not just my area, but other areas as well. I saw something referring to what may be a long-term or a full-time substitute teacher type role, given the situation that they might need substitute teachers in the building all day long, every day, and they want you to return day after day, and maybe go from class to a couple of different classrooms and help out with the administering of both the class material and monitoring the safety precautions. So who knows how the substitute teacher's life is going to change. I'll say this. I'm thankful that I am in a situation where I feel like I'm healthy. I hope your family is in the same situation. I have prayed for this situation to get better. Every school is going to handle it in a safety way. You now know the precautions that my school system is taking. I hope that the precautions that we take helps to minimize this situation as much as possible. Who would have thought? I mean, we haven't had to deal with something like this since 1918. This is a pandemic that is throughout the world. It is so bizarre. I miss my sports, but more than that, I want everybody to stay healthy. I'm looking forward to baseball coming back. Somebody asked me the other day, if they open up baseball eventually, will you go to a game if they open up to attendance? And I told them I probably would, because that's my favorite sport. But I would take whatever safety cautions are in place. So please, I won't address how you feel about masks, but make sure you distance yourself appropriately so that you don't have to risk getting sick and the other person doesn't have to risk getting sick either. It's something we all need to do together. It's, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this more as we get closer. And I'll be honest, when I was thinking about doing this episode this week, so many things popped into my mind. Some of them while I was walking, some of them, while I was just out and about. Some of them I tried to type into my phone, but there's no way I remember them all. In fact, I just thought of another one that I had forgotten to write down. We've got computers in those classrooms. Sometimes they're around the side of the wall. Sometimes I've seen some actually pop out of the desk. I assume the procedures for all that is going to change unless they're just completely sanitized between classes. And of course, probably the most common thing are those Google Chromebook carts. What are we going to do now? Before we were used to having the Google Chromebooks used in every class. So period number 2, there would be students using the Chromebooks that period number 1 students had already touched. So we're going to have to work through all that. I assume all that's going to change too. So another thing to consider. And again, I'm hoping that you send me things to talk about at gregcollinssubstitute@gmail.com. I want your best ideas. We're going to have to help out the school systems. We're going to have to help out the teachers get ready for the classes. We're going to have to help the teachers when we get there. And by all means, the most important part of this is our students. We need to educate our students, and we need to keep them safe at the same time. We need to keep them safe in spite of themselves, because they got their friends there. They're going to want to talk to their friends just like they always have. So I'm concerned about that, but I want them to be able to communicate with their friends too. So we're going to have to do everything we can as substitute teachers. So I will just say, teachers, bless your hearts in dealing with this. I have so much respect for you. I am willing to do anything that you need me to do to create that safe environment and to educate our students. So that's it for this week on Substitute Teachers Lounge. Music provided by Ben Sound.